Welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Patrina, and today we are going to be getting into blueberries, specifically my container blueberries. I noticed this last season they fruited beautifully, but they have not grown a lot of their leaves back. And so I was narrowing down all the different issues that could possibly be causing them to be a little bit sluggish in, putting on more leaves on the blueberry trees. And I realized that it might have something to do with the pH. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you know that I used to have these guys in the ground and they were awful. And they did kind of the same thing where they would lose their leaves, but they also wouldn't fruit. They were just so unhappy in the ground. And turns out that it was because my soil pH was closer to neutral. It sits in that 7.2 range. And blueberries really like the soil pH to be around a 5.5 or, anywhere from 5 to a 5.5. The lower the better. So I pulled them out of the ground and put them in these containers so that I could monitor their pH better. So when I put them in their containers, I went with a more acidic soil, which I'm going to tell you about in just a moment here. And then I also used a soil acidifier. The instructions on the bag of Espama's soil acidifier says to put some down and then check it in 60 days. So basically give it 60 days. And that's what I was doing. And I started to see it drop, but I continued to put it down because I thought you had to keep putting it down until you reached the right number. That is not the case. Learn from my mistake here. When I noticed that these guys were having a hard time putting on leaves, I was like, let me check the pH. It can't possibly be too high. Nope. It was too low. I had literally gone from one extreme to the other, which, if you know me, this is not uncommon. I outdo everything. I either do too much or too little. I'm never right in the middle. So now I'm like, okay, I have to fix this situation. And the way that I'm going to fix this situation is I'm going to pot these up. It's actually time for me to pot these blueberries up anyway. I try to do them every year or two, depending on the size. The smaller they are, the more often I have to pot them up, but at this size, usually it's every 2 years. I didn't pot them up last year, so this is the perfect time to pot them up. And while I do that, I knocked off a bunch of the acidic soil that was in there. Kind of got rid of some of that extra sulfur that comes in the soil acidifier, and then I'm going to basically create the soil from scratch. Now this is my absolute perfect blend of soil to use for blueberries. I start out with peat moss, and not like a peat moss mix, not like a soil that has a peat moss base, but actual peat moss. And the reason why that's important is a lot of those soil mixes will put stuff in it to increase the acidity to a more alkaline level, which is what most vegetables and fruits like. They want to sit in that 6.5 to 7. So a lot of the times if you look at the ingredients in those mixes, they're going to have something like gypsum or lime or something like that, and those naturally, make them less acidic. But we want acidic here because blueberries want to be in a more acidic soil, so we don't want those things. So that's why we go with straight peat moss. Now, I am completely fully aware that peat moss right now is not considered the most sustainable. Coconut coir is a better growing medium for that, but in the very rare instances where I'm dealing with a soil that needs to be acidic, it is the one and only time that I buy peat moss. Otherwise, I do kind of lean into the coconut coir. The other thing you see me adding here was those little chips. That is pine shavings. You can use pine needles, pine shavings. I buy the big old pack that's used for animal bedding, because pine in itself is kind of known to encourage acidity as well. You could go out and get pine shavings or pine needles or pine bark, pine mulch, whatever you have. I mean, some of the stuff is going to be falling from pine trees around you. You can use that. I added in some sand as well because I did notice that with all this peat moss and with all of the pine shavings, that this stuff it holds water just a tad too much. So I went and grabbed some native sand from my yard. Here in Florida, we are just inundated with sand. So I added some native sand in hopes that it was going to help it drain a little bit more. If you don't have that, maybe you don't have super sandy soil, you could add perlite or vermiculite. I still left in a little bit of the highly acidic soil that I brushed off of the root ball of the blueberry plant, because this mix right here is probably going to get you to a 6, but it's not going to get you to a 5 or 5.5. So I added a little bit of my current acidic soil, and to kind of bring it down a little bit more, you might need to add just a couple tablespoons of the soil acidifier. Don't do too much, guys. Don't keep doing it. Just, you got to kind of let it sit for 6 months. The other thing I like to add is a little bit of nutrients. Now, blueberries aren't heavy, feeders. They're not looking for high amounts of nitrogen, high amounts of phosphorus. If you get too crazy with it, they're going to have big plants with no blueberries on it. So what I added here was actually some worm castings. Now, I don't typically use a lot of worm castings in my gardens because I just have a ton of worms. I just don't feel like they're necessary. But if you're looking for something that just feeds a little bit, worm castings actually really is a good one. It's a nice little amendment to top some containers with, especially if you're growing like fruit trees. They benefit probably the most from that. I think the vegetable garden, it feels like it's just a little bit too light for me. It's great for blueberries. You could also use an organic fertilizer, but I would definitely go with about half of what they recommend. And I would definitely go with like a tomato or flowering one where it has a little bit more phosphorus. You don't really want this guy to get like an excessive amount of nitrogen, so that's one of the reasons. So now I'm just going to put my root ball at the level that I want it at, which is kind of at the top of the pot, and that will give it room for the roots to grow down into the bottom of the pot. I haven't tested it yet because this kind of needs to sit and it needs to marinate. Like if we're cooking, the soil needs to kind of blend together for the proper acidity to come out. But I do have a pH monitor that I'm going to do. It's not perfect. Those home kits are not the best way to measure pH, but it is an option if you're not ready to do a soil test, and I'm really not ready to do a soil test at this particular moment. So I have two of them. This one actually looks a little bit better than the other one, so I assume that the pH on this one probably isn't quite as bad as the pH on the other one. So we're just going to go through the same exercise of knocking it off. While we do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how my blueberry season went this year. It was really good. I was very, very happy with the amount of blueberries that these two plants produced. And then I was on social media and I saw somebody else with a container blueberry and theirs produced like a crazy amount. And I'm like, huh, mine could be doing better. I wonder what I could be doing. Obviously, the acidity might be a situation that needs to happen. Maybe that's what brought it down a little bit. But the other thing I've heard for years and years and years is you need to have two varieties. And so this last spring, after seeing how many blueberries I got and being happy with them, but then seeing other people that had larger amounts, I thought, I think I'm going to add two new family members to the garden. So to the homegrown garden, we have added a pink lemonade blueberry. I actually have been looking for this at my local nurseries for a long time. Could never find them. They are never at the nursery when I go look for them. So I went online to Burpee, and Burpee was selling them in spring. And I just checked to make sure that the chill hours met the requirements that my area does, and they did. There's actually quite a few blueberries that can grow with a lot less chill hours than you were expecting. This one needs, I think, around 150 to 250, so that's perfect for my area. But there are some that grow at almost zero. So keep an eye out for those because there are some out there. Now these guys, they've been sitting in a pot for a long time and they have grown these like long spindly things, and I have learned my lesson. You do need to prune your blueberries. And so I thought I have to prune it. While I'm pruning it, maybe I should take some cuttings, because if these blueberries do amazing like I expect them to, because they're going to have two different varieties cross-pollinating, maybe I can get an immense amount of blueberries, and maybe these pink lemonade blueberries are going to be my favorite, so why not have more plants? So I took the tops off to prune them, but now we are going to propagate them, which I'll show you in just a moment. The first thing we want to do is move these guys that we just recently potted up into shade and give them a nice watering. I'm not doing a super deep watering because the peat moss does hold on to a lot of water. So I'm just kind of doing a gentle watering, and then I'm just going to let the rain do the rest of the work. I've propagated blueberries in the past and I have never really had a good outcome. So I'm doing them a little bit different this year. Almost always when I propagate a plant, I start out the exact same way here. 6 to 9 inch cuttings, and then I pull off the leaves on the bottom so that it's just stem with a couple leaves on top. And then I will dip it in some rooting hormone or some honey, and then I will put it in moist soil. I did that last year with some of my blueberry cuttings and they just wilted away and died. So this year I thought, you know what, I'm going to try the more traditional way, which some people do, which is to put them in a glass of water. Sometimes these do better this way than other ways, and I've really found that it works better when you're having like a green stem. So if it is a green stem and not a woody stem, putting them in water seems to help them not rot, which seems like it should be the other way around. But I digress. These guys, it ended up working out. It's been a couple weeks since I did this, and they are starting to put on roots in this little cup, but I promise you, it seems like it's going to take a very long time for them to get enough roots for me to move them to a pot. So I hope this helped you get some ideas of how you can pot up your blueberries if they're in containers, or moving them to containers to help control the acidity levels of the soil, and also how to kind of manage these soil levels. Happy gardening, guys!